Welcome to New York Got Game.
Another week with you on New York Got Game. We're very close to the finish line of the NBA season for the local teams. 4 games left for the Knicks and just 3 remaining for the Nets. Now, Brooklyn, they were eliminated from playoff contention last week, while the Knicks, they're trying to figure out where they're going to be seated in the upcoming playoffs. Now, last week, Knickerbocker fans, they got some rough news as they learned forward Julius Randle will undergo season-ending shoulder surgery. OG Anunoby, after missing 9 games, he did return to the lineup on Friday in Chicago, so we will see how OG can impact the Knicks' final push towards the playoffs. However, we've got plenty of time to talk about injuries and the playoffs with the Knicks, but we're going to get to that. Today, we're going to keep the vibes positive. We're going to talk about one Knickerbocker who's having a special season. Let's get right to it.
The Knicks are heating up.
Right now, point guard Jalen Brunson is the face of the New York Knicks. In his second year, number 11 made his first All-Star team, and he's put up numbers this season that has him in the conversation for league MVP. So I wanted to spend this episode talking about Brunson's impact on the Knicks with some nuance, and also take a look at how he can impact the team this postseason and beyond. Now, there was no better person to have this conversation with than someone I know who roots for shorter, or should I say, undersized ball players. He is a sports reporter for the New York Post and also a contributor to the Action Network. My guy, Bryan Fonseca. What's going on, Bryan?
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. You're the perfect person, I think, to talk about this. We know you like undersized guards. You like tough guards.
Yes.
I know you. I know you're kind of basketball player. There's a Bryan Fonseca kind of basketball player.
That's right.
Jalen Brunson is that guy. He's that guy for you.
Yeah.
He's your kind of player. All right. Let's start with this because Jalen Brunson was named an All-Star this year. And last week, the point guard was named Eastern Conference Player of the Month for March. What do you think has been the key to his exceptional performance this season?
Should have been All-Star twice, by the way.
You had to get that. Yeah.
He should have been All-Star last year, and I felt like he probably should have won Most Improved Player last year, but that's just me. So he was 41.6% from 3 last year, about 40% this year, and that is a slight drop-off. However, he's taking more threes this year, which is important because he's taking 7 threes per 36 minutes as opposed to 5 threes per 36 minutes last year. So the efficiency remains, even though you would think, hey, there's a little bit of a drop-off there. Like, no, he's making up for it. You could see it in the points. As Julius Randle has missed games, he's been averaging 30 with about 6-7 assists, and also doing it efficiently, which is not something that you would think given the higher usage, given the role, and given the transformation since Julius Randle's been out and what he's had to take on offensively. It's not just Julius Randle also. It's been OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson just came back. He's been out for a long time. His three-point rate went from 26.9 to 32.4. And if you're looking at it from a analytics perspective, yeah, that's actually more favorable to what he should be doing. He's taking more threes. He's not doing as much in the mid-range, even though it looks like he is. He's not doing as much as he was doing in previous seasons. So in terms of that, there's the analytic portion of it. And the basketball portion of it is just, you just watch the dude, and he can get to any spot he seemingly wants. Like if you watch him, for example, in the Spurs game, it didn't matter who they threw in front of him. Now, Spurs are not a great team defensively, even though that one dude, Victor Wembanyama, he might make all defense, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he might make all defense as a rookie, which does not happen. But Jalen Brunson was able to get to his mid-range spots, was able to get to the three-point shot. And you're so paranoid about guarding him that he's going to, come up at an inopportune time for the defense that you're going to foul him. So you're tempted to guard him almost like this, that they did at James Harden that one time. Like, he's just such a creative offensive player, and I think that really has a lot to do with his success.
He's been absolutely tremendous on the offensive end. Bryan, you referencing that 61 piece that he dropped on the Spurs where he was incredibly efficient in that one, although he took a team, I believe it was 46 shots in that one. So, you got to really respect what he's done there. With the season winding down and Brunson's recent accolade, talking about Player of the Month, do you see him winding up on ballots for NBA MVP? Because there's been a lot of talk about that he's had an MVP-like season. What does he need to do to solidify his case as either MVP or being top 5 on those ballots?
Jokic, Luka, SGA, Giannis, Brunson might be 5th. To me, he's probably 5th. I know Tatum is going to get a lot of love there. Some people may have Tatum even higher than 5th, but he's on a machine. And I think Julius Randle's injury actually lets you realize how valuable Jalen Brunson is because it feels like, and this is not to discredit, like the Knicks have some of my favorite role players in the league to watch. You know, talking about the guys that I like.
Yeah.
Josh Hart.
No, that's a Bryan Fonseca all-star right there.
He does all the dirty work. He can do a little bit of everything. You wish he would shoot a little bit more every now and again. But Josh Hart is he's perfect for what the Knicks are trying to do, as is Isaiah Hartenstein, one of my favorite bigs in the NBA at this point, right? But Jalen Brunson has really carried the load offensively to a point that nobody saw coming. To me, he's fifth. And that means something because you know, not a lot of Knicks in history have gotten MVP ballot love. Like Carmelo Anthony, I think it's the last one, who he was either second or third in the year that he was a scoring champion. I believe it was third. LeBron James obviously won MVP that year. We're talking about the 2012-2013 season, which is really the last time, other than last year, that you felt this good about a Knicks team. Jalen Brunson's been at the center of that, and I think he should be on MVP ballots.
All right, you think he should be on MVP ballots? He's had a tremendous year. I think he's definitely going to get some votes. You could see him finishing fifth. I don't think that's crazy there at all. But when you look at this season, the 2023-2024 season, what does this year mean for Brunson historically, especially in the context of Knicks history? You kind of just talked about how the Knicks haven't had somebody in the MVP ballot in quite some time. It's been over a decade since that's happened. But what does this season mean for Brunson in the context of Knicks history?
Something you remember about like great Knicks teams, because unfortunately there hasn't been as many historically as you would think. There was at one point, but that's since sort of tapered off in this century. But one thing that you remember about the great teams is you remember who the signature player on that team was or who the signature players on those teams were. And it starts really before the 70s, but we'll go back to the 70s because we don't want to go back too far for the purposes of moving this conversation along. But you have Walt Frazier. You remember that. That meant something, obviously, at the center of multiple championship teams. Obviously, Willis Reed at that point, too. Later on in the 80s, people loved Bernard King. Now, they didn't have the same level of team success when he was at his peak, and obviously injuries derailed that. But Bernard King is somebody who's loved in this city forever because of what he did. And at one point, he was one of the absolute best players in the NBA. It just wasn't for a lengthy period of time, so people kind of forget, especially because it was so long ago now. Patrick Ewing after that. You also remember guys like Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell, then later on Carmelo Anthony. Like, Jalen Brunson is now one of those dudes, and he's one of those dudes because he's the face of a Knicks franchise, of a Knicks team that is actually good. He's the face of a team who now may have a shot at getting to back-to-back, at least conference semifinals if they win in the first round of the playoffs, which is not going to be easy. You know, the Eastern Conference is pretty deep this year. I mean, I know people love the Western Conference. The East is all over the place. It's going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds. But Jalen Brunson has the chance to be the best or one of the best, depending on how you feel about Julius Randle, players on this Knicks team who has been to multiple conference semifinals. The last Knicks iteration to go to the second round multiple times hasn't been since the late 90s. So that's historic in itself. And Jalen Brunson has a chance to do that. And oh, by the way, as I continue to tell you, salary cap wise, business wise, like they have a chance to really extend this window because they don't have any max contracts.
Right.
I don't think OG Anunoby is going to get a max contract. I'd be surprised at that. So like this is something that they can keep going for a little bit longer. This is not just going to end this year, I don't think.
And we're going to get into that in this conversation about where the Knicks can go, especially with Jalen Brunson as being the face of the franchise. You're right. I think when people hear what you say, Bryan, they're going to say, well, he's among those names you mentioned in just 2 years. Yeah, folks, that's how impressive these 2 seasons have been. Like, they've been really impressive. It also kind of speaks to the downtime that the Knicks have had. And, you know, previously, the 3 out of the last 4 years are going to make the playoffs. But before that, Knicks fans, you know this, it had not really been good for the Knicks. And I think that speaks to a lot of that as well, too. So, with that being said, Bryan, where do you rank Brunson? Where would you rank him among all-time Knicks players and point guards? If we're putting him in that class of players that you just mentioned, where is he in terms of all-time players and in all-time point guards? I feel, I'm going to give my opinion on this, right?
Go.
I think he's already, and I'm not the first person to say this. Our colleague Stephen Bondi has said this. It's the best point guard the Knicks have had since Walt Clyde Frazier. So I think he's number 2 in terms of point guards, right? I don't know if you agree with me on that, but where do we have him in all-time players and point guards. What's the Bryan Fonseca rankings on this?
If I wanted to disagree with you, I don't
You
think
don't want to.
I don't. If I wanted to, I don't
Right.
think I could, right? Because like he's better than, all due respect, better than Michael Ray Richardson, who was a 3-time All-Star with the Knicks, wasn't on a team that won a playoff game when he was with the Knicks.
Right.
You know, all defense, all those things, and we know that kind of ended very abruptly. Stephon Marbury, maybe more talented, didn't have the team success, didn't win the playoff game with the Knicks either, and also wasn't as good as Jalen Brunson is right now. Like, he obviously had moments, he put up numbers. The Stephon Marbury experience is an interesting one, but, like, it wasn't this. And then you have Mark Jackson, who had the longevity, but he wasn't doing what Jalen Brunson is doing. Like, Jalen Brunson, I think it might not even be close that he's after Walt Frazier. Like, you're not getting in front of Walt Frazier unless you get one, maybe multiple championships, right? But what he's doing, and if he's able to sustain it and not be like Isaiah Thomas, Celtics Isaiah Thomas, where it was a couple awesome years for a small guard and then injuries happened and then it went, that is one of my concerns because of the way he plays, and you don't want that to happen. You obviously want this to be extended, but I think if Jalen Brunson's able to do this for an extended period, we're going to be talking about him and Walt Clyde Frazier as the best New York Knicks point guards ever, which is not something we thought we'd be saying, given that he was seen as, oh, why are they paying so much for him? You know, he was on the Dallas Mavericks. Was he their second, third best player on the team, whatever. Now we're talking about he might be the Knicks' best point guard in like 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the proof's in the pudding. And obviously, if he continues to win, folks, that's only going to add to it as well, too. And if he ever does what Walt Clyde Frazier did, and that's win a title, winning 2, if he ever does something like that, now he's in a whole nother stratosphere. Now, Bryan, I said this at the top. We know this about you. You love some small, scrappy guards. Brunson fits that definition. And he's found success as a small guard. You kind of just mentioned this, right? Picked in the second round of the NBA draft.
Yeah.
What do you think has contributed to his ability to defy expectations? Because when you're picked in the second round, people are basically saying they thought a lot of people before you were better. He's been better than a lot of the people that were drafted before him. He's defied expectations, and he's an all-star. You believe he should have been a 2-time all-star and most improved player of the year last year. How's he done this? How has he been able to defy the expectations? I know you think that the short guys out there on the basketball court get counted out sometimes.
Underrepresented.
Underrepresented.
Yes.
You're here to represent for them. How has he done this?
He just gets better every year is the short answer. You watch him on the basketball court, like even if you watch him at Villanova, you saw some of this, but it wasn't like this. And the Villanova development is interesting, right? They used that against him coming out of the draft. He should have been a first-round pick. He wasn't, probably because of the size, probably because of the lack of athleticism, probably because he hung around through his junior year. And these are the things that sort of dock your draft stock, because guys like athleticism, just sort of that promise, the potential, and also coming out as a freshman helps just from an age standpoint, because by the time you get to your second contract, you're just 22, 23, 24 years old, depending on where you're picked. With Jalen Brunson, he's just gotten better. Dude is just a baller, like it's the other short version of this. And if you watch him at Villanova, you're seeing like guard post-ups, for example, which Jay Wright and Villanova, when Jay Wright was at Villanova, did a lot. Did this with Jalen Brunson, did this with Dante DiVincenzo, did this with Ryan Arcidiacono, all guys that played for the Knicks, because, you know, they have all the Villanova players, it feels like, except for Mikal Bridges, which, you know, maybe one day they will. With Jalen Brunson, he's able to, because of the guard post-ups, because of how creative he is in the mid-range, and because he can get to his three-point shot, he's great at using his body to draw contact and, again, make defenders very scared at guarding him and potentially fouling him. He's great at finishing through that contact, getting to his floater. Like, he has all the short guy shots you need in your bag. Like when I was playing basketball back in the day, you needed a floater. You needed a floater. You needed a mid-range game. You needed a three-point shot because, you know, you ain't getting to the rim like that. Jalen Brunson's not going to be out here like yamming it on people. So you need that 10 to 12-foot floater, that 8-foot floater. And he's just so adept at it. And also he's a lefty, which I still think for whatever reason catches people off guard. But he's totally comfortable going to his right and creating to his right, which he does all the time. You mentioned something that I think in terms of when we look at basketball players in development, you know how I feel about this. I think sometimes athleticism gets overrated, particularly in today's game where skill matters more. And I feel like the skill was kind of there for people to see,
with Jalen Brunson, but people look sometimes at all the things that a player doesn't have, right? So he doesn't have the athleticism instead of looking at what he does has. And I wonder if when you look at players like Jalen Brunson, there's some other players you could mention in the league like this, maybe it's a cautionary tale that we should start looking differently at how we draft players and assessing their value and projecting what they can be in the league. Now, something else you mentioned, and we're going to do this. We're going to have a little revisionist history here, okay? And for people watching, please be honest with yourself about this. No lies here. We're going to go back to the summer of 2022, okay? When New York signed Brunson as a free agent, you know where I'm going with this, Brian. Some believed, and you just mentioned it, some people were out here saying, this is an overpay. What are the Knicks doing? How could you give him the bag? He's not worth this money. Why do you think that was the case, that people were so skeptical, about the Knicks giving him the money that they did? And now he's proved the critics wrong. Why do you think it was the case that people were so skeptical about this guy?
Because he was paid like a star player, and he wasn't to that point. He was good in Dallas, but
right.
he wasn't to that point. And it was also, there's a level of skepticism that the Knicks have earned in recent history. And it's like, wait, this is who they're giving their bag to, so to speak. Like, this is the big free agent acquisition. And it was like, is he really that good? Then there were tampering accusations, and it's because it seemed like it was in the works for a while. Rick Brunson is already on the staff, all these different things. Like, I remember the Knicks got a lot of criticism for that. Coincidentally, they got a lot of criticism for signing Julius Randle in the same summer where the Nets swept the summer with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and DeAndre Jordan. And look who kind of won that summer comparatively, even though that was one of the more unheralded moves league-wide. They didn't have the best offseason that year, but they got a better deal out of that. With Jalen Brunson, though, I think he just wasn't, it kind of ties into the draft conversation. Wasn't projected to be a star. We had 4 years of sample at the NBA level. He was a good player. It's like, why are you paying him 9 figures on a long-term contract? It doesn't make a lot of sense. One point that you made when we talked about this years ago was like, listen, like, market value kind of dictates this. Maybe it's a slight overpay, but at the same time, to get a guy like this, to get him in your building, this is kind of the cost of doing business. And he's delivered because he's not on a max contract. He's playing like a max player. He's somebody who has multiple years left on his deal. He's somebody who, if he keeps this going, you're going to extend him for even more money because he's earned it. And he has been maybe the best free agent signing in Knicks history at this point, right? Like, listen, I remember Allen Houston, one of my favorite players when I was growing up. He got 5 years, $100 million, didn't really work out. There are some other instances that we don't need to talk about. I like referencing the Jerome James signing and things of that nature.
Jerome James, Jared Jeffries.
There's been a lot of those, but they hit it out of the park with Jalen Brunson, and I think that, with Julius Randle, he's got multiple All-NBA bids, so that's a signing that's worked out too. So the Knicks just functionally, it's a testament to how they've been running as an organization lately. They've been one of the better run organizations in the NBA, which is not something that I grew up saying about this organization ever at any point.
No, there's no doubt about that. And you're right. I did make that point about market value and the cost of doing business a couple of years ago when they signed him. I didn't think it was a bad deal. Some people were, really up in arms about it. And now, when you look at it, you talk about all the stuff with his value, he's underpaid right now, which bodes well for the Knicks going forward, but also in terms of the team flexibility that they have right now, right? Because they have 2 All-Stars, another All-NBA player. You think Jalen Brunson is in that caliber this year, and they're not even paying him max money. It's pretty good.
Pretty good deal.
To go back to something you just said too. Okay, it's not about the pay. He got the bag. He is a star now.
Yeah. Not
many people projected him to be a star.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why was that? Why were those people wrong? And so wrong, because it's way off, including the people that thought this was an overpay, because why are you paying for somebody that is not a star? I think no matter how much you feel and what level of star you think he is, you can at least say he's that. He made an all-star team. And not that that's the end-all, be-all, but also likely to make an all-NBA team. Yeah. Why were these people so wrong, so off on Jalen Brunson?
I think it just goes back to how people feel about draft prospects coming out in 2018, for example, and even like in 2022 when he's a free agent. It's like, wait, he's a small guard. He's not excellent at anything was kind of the rap on him. Like, he's not super athletic. Again, going back to that conversation, a little bit older because he hung around in college through an upperclassman phase, right? And I think it's just all these sort of like these dog whistles, if you will, that they use against certain guys, right? And I think ultimately if you can play, you can play. Like teams who are good at finding sort of undrafted players or second round finds and developing them no matter their age. Like we see what the Miami Heat do all the time with guys like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, who are a little bit older. We've seen the Knicks do this a little bit also with the guys on their roster. Like you're finding guys at different points of their career, and ultimately what matters is can they play. We saw the Pistons trade for Simone Fontecchio, who, you know, was an older rookie, but is somebody who they think he can be a supporting cast piece around what they have with Kay Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. Like, that's just valuing somebody who can play. And I think with Jalen Brunson, it comes down to valuing somebody who can play, regardless of age, regardless of what you feel about his athleticism, regardless of the fact that he's, I think, listed 6'2", even though I think he's probably like 6 feet tall. Look, short dude. I list myself a little bit taller sometimes, too.
Of course you do. Of course
you know what I'm saying? Like,
of course you do. I would expect nothing less from you.
I know who I am. I'm a welterweight. I'm comfortable with that. You know, it is what it is. But with Jalen Brunson, like, I think it really goes back to people looking at him and not processing, like, this could be here, like what it is. Like, this could be one of the best guards in the NBA, which he has been over the last couple of years.
And to that point, sometimes it's just about can you hoop or not, right? Like, can you just hoop or not? And finding and getting good players, and sometimes good two-way players or efficient players in terms of scoring on the offensive end, sometimes that just matters. Now, you've seen this many times this season. And Knicks fans, you probably know where I'm going. There's been a lot of discussion, whether it was from Candace Parker, whether it's from other people, a question about whether or not Brunson is a star or what level of NBA star that people think he is. Mm-hmm. Do you consider Jalen Brunson, and especially after what we've seen from him this season, do you consider him a legit superstar in the league? Why or why not? And yes, I'm using the term superstar here. Is he at the level? Is he a superstar in the National Basketball Association?
It's tough for me because there's only really a handful of superstars. So my bar for superstars is very high. Like Nikola Jokic is obvious. I think Luka Doncic, we would all acknowledge, like, that's obvious. There's just really a handful of dudes. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is playing like a superstar, but, like, can I actually see him in the playoffs a little bit more or at all, really, right? Like, I'm not giving him that yet. He's been a superstar during the regular season, but, like, I think the definition, really, like, he's unquestionably, he being Jalen Brunson, he's a star player. But there are other guys, even Jason Tatum, for example, to some, is on the fringes of being a superstar. Is somebody who's not in a lot of people's top fives, is probably in a lot of people's top sevens, top 8. He might not be on an MVP ballot this year, on everybody's MVP ballot this year. He'll be on MVP ballots for sure. He's the best player on the Celtics. He'll be on some MVP ballots. But you get what I'm saying. Like, I think there's levels of superstardom. I think ultimately what matters, whether or not he's a star, superstar, whatever, he's playing like a consistent all-star, like a perennial all-star. He's one of the best guards in the NBA, which is supposedly a guard-driven league and a wing-driven league. Like, you have one of those dudes now. Is he a top 10 player in the NBA? I don't know. I'm not sure that matters, because what ultimately matters is, can you play well in the playoffs? He's been a little bit of a playoff riser over the last couple times. We've seen him in the playoffs. That last series with the Mavericks, he was good. And last year with the Knicks, he was really good. He really pushed the Heat in that Game 6 and almost forced it a Game 7 series, even though, like, the Knicks as a whole were struggling very much offensively in that game. Like, he has another spring to prove that he's that dude, and I think he's probably going to do that to at least some extent.
All right, so you think he could be knocking on the door, could eventually possibly get there. We'll see how that all goes. Now, you heard Bryan rank where Brunson ranks among New York Knicks players and also guards. You don't think it's crazy. We both don't think it's crazy. He's already the second best point guard since Walt Clyde Frazier in Knicks history. Mm-hmm. Where does Jalen Brunson rank among New York's top athletes? Is Jalen Brunson the most famous athlete in New York right now? If he's not, who holds that title? Because you're talking about the level of success that he's had. Is he the most famous New York athlete at this point?
Most famous? Well, here's the thing. When you're the best player on the Knicks and on a good Knicks team, there's kind of a cheat code, right? Like, and, you know, it's a little bit different. And also, we're in April, so we're getting ready for the NBA playoffs. Baseball just started. A lot of people, this is still very much a baseball town in a lot of different ways. However, our New York Mets aren't doing great so far. And the Yankees, well, it's still April, so we'll see. We'll see ultimately what happens. But in terms of Jalen Brunson's competition on this list, like most famous New York athletes, if we actually think about this, Aaron Judge is somebody who's at or near the top of this list. Pete Alonso is probably not past Aaron Judge, but he's got to be mentioned in this conversation. I mentioned Breanna Stewart here, Sabrina Ionescu here, because New York Liberty have a chance, again, to get back to the WNBA Finals, potentially win it this year. We'll see, because the Aces and the Seattle Storm are probably coming for their necks. Igor Shesterkin, goalie for the Rangers. We were just talking about before this, the Rangers always keep a good goalie on them. My entire life, the Rangers have pretty much been good in goal, whether it's going down from Mike Richter all the way to Henrik Lundqvist, and now you have Igor Shesterkin, but a lot of people probably don't know what he looks like because he wears a mask all the time. Sauce Gardner, at least he's in commercials, so you know what he looks like. Sauce Gardner has to be mentioned in this conversation. So does his quarterback and BFF Aaron Rodgers, even though he's played like 4 snaps so far with the Jets. He's got to be mentioned in this conversation, right? And other than that, you're looking at Mikal Bridges, Julius Randle. The Giants ain't got nobody. Saquon Barkley left. The Giants ain't got nobody for this conversation right now.
Strays at the Giants fans.
I think it just is what it is. I think Jalen Brunson's first. He's the most famous athlete in New York right now. He's one of the best athletes in New York right now. It's him and Aaron Judge. Those are probably the top 2. And maybe Pete Alonso was sniffing around there to some degree. And Breanna Stewart, as we mentioned. But Jalen Brunson's number 1 right now. When you're the best player, when you're the king of the Knicks, and the Knicks are good, feel like at least fringe contenders, yeah, he's probably going to get that spot.
No, I don't think it's crazy, especially when you look at what he's done the last couple of seasons, his output, and yeah, it's very recognizable, right? Like, he's not NBA superstar in a ton of great big national commercials. We got that Dunkin' Donuts commercial. You've seen him.
Got a March Madness one now.
March Madness commercial.
With the TVs and the jacket or whatever.
Yeah, so Knicks fans
get robbed real quick in the subway. I would not wear that anymore.
that might not be the move on the subway. Okay, so we talked about how Jalen Brunson has been undervalued probably early in his career, maybe why some people might underrate him now, and where he's gone from being underpaid now, right? We're saying that about him, that he's underpaid now, going from being a second-round pick to we're actually talking about him being underpaid. When you look at all that, you got to talk about development. So what role has Coach Tom Thibodeau played in Brunson's development and success with the Knicks? And that's one part of the question. And what other areas of Brunson's game, especially as a small guard, do you think that he still needs to work on in order to reach that next level, which would be to get to superstar status?
In terms of development, well, he plays the hell out of him. That helps. He
gives him minutes.
He gives him minutes. You know, he definitely gets a chance out there. You know what I mean? He gets chances to work through mistakes. I think the last level for Jalen Brunson is probably just the defense. Like the offense, I don't know what more you could ask for. I don't know what more he could do. And frankly, I don't want him to have like the league lead. He doesn't lead the league in usage, but I don't want him there because again, small guards, like you want them to age well, so you don't want them to have to do all he does all the time. You'd want there to be more help so that you can have him do it in the fourth quarter as opposed to, having to do this off the jump. So for me, it's really just a defense. And I'm not saying he needs to be an all-defense type of dude because realistically, if you're creating that much offense in the NBA, it's just very hard to do. Like we don't have like a great sort of amount of two-way players that are elite at both levels. But just being better on the defensive end is pretty much the last level you could ask for. And, it should be noted that he is second in the NBA in charges taken. He's second after Brandon Podziemski from the Golden State Warriors. So he is doing that. But I think that's really the last level for me, just perimeter defense.
I think a lot of people think about his game raising on the offensive end, but I think you make good points. And Jalen Brunson has been a competitor on the defensive end. As you said, second in the league in charges. So it's a good thing. Defense. Defense is where Brunson can get better. Okay, speaking of next level, let's talk about where the Knicks can actually take things. How far do you think this Knicks squad can go if Jalen Brunson is their best player? Right now, he is clearly the best player on the team. And obviously in this season now without Julius Randle, who is out for the season, going to have season-ending shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
He's the best player. And then even if you look beyond that, how far can this Knicks team go with a small guard as their best player? Because you know this. Here comes the doubt, Brian. Some people are going to say you can't win with a small guard as your best player. I know as a smaller man, you say no to that. I know you will.
I know. Let's calm down.
Say no. I know that. You ride with your short brethren there. Can this Knicks team go far with Jalen Brunson as their best player? What do you say?
You know, the reason why it didn't work out for the Charlotte Hornets when they had Kemba Walker is because you tell me who his second best player was on that team. Was on any of those teams. Was it Jeremy Lamb, maybe Al Jefferson at one point? Like, they didn't really have that second guy. And when it's a short guard, a small guard in that scenario, very, very difficult to overcome. The Isaiah Thomas Celtics, he didn't have a ton of help alongside him when he was doing what he did in terms of, you know, challenging for the scoring title and I think winning it one year, as a matter of fact. The thing that the Knicks have is, like, they have the good role players in place. They have other guys who can make plays. The issue is you just need a little bit more creation outside of Jalen Brunson and when he's healthy, Julius Randle. Dante DiVincenzo is wilding from three right now. Like, he'll take 10, 12, 15 threes in a game. Doesn't matter. Like, he'll go crazy from there. But I think in terms of just laying out the foundation, they've done that. They just need to continue to improve the roster around him is really my answer. Like, can you win with Jalen Brunson as your best player on the championship team? I would say it really depends on what else you have on the roster. Because one player never wins a championship. You need depth. You need other pieces. And if you look at small guards throughout NBA history who have been, you know, the face of contenders and playing in the NBA finals and things of that nature, Steph Curry had somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, these guys have somebody else traditionally. And Julius Randle is probably that dude. Maybe. We'll see. He has to, you know, develop more of a positive playoff resume for you to feel comfortable saying that. But I think if you have the right parts around him in an Eastern Conference that's wide open and you don't know what's going to happen from year to year, I think they're going about it the right way. So I think continuing to surround him with these kinds of role players, maybe you'll see some positive results, a conference finals appearance and things of that nature.
All right, there you go, Knicks fans. Brian, optimistic about the way the Knicks are building this team around Jalen Brunson. Last thing for me here, Brian, because we're going to go to talk about legacy. If Brunson continues on this kind of current trajectory, which I would say is upward, right? Trajectory is going upward for Jalen Brunson.
It ain't going down.
It's not going down. What kind of legacy do you think he can build with this Knicks team? Are we looking in the future and saying Jalen Brunson, champion, two-time champion, three-time champion? Knicks fans, don't get too excited here. But you understand I'm going, do you think he can build that kind of legacy as a champion that only increases his standing as a New York Knick?
This kind of brings us full circle to what we were talking about before in terms of, like, where he could be in Knicks lore. If they win a title with this dude as their best player, forget it. Like, you're talking about the jersey is being retired right away. Like, they might not even wait till he retires to retire the jersey. You know what I mean? Like, it's that level because we've been saying forever, if you're the best player on the Knicks and you win a championship, or if the Knicks just win the title in our lifetimes, because that hasn't happened for, you know, a lot of people, like, that is something different. This is why people thought Kevin Durant should have actually went to the Knicks as opposed to the Nets. Because, no disrespect, he wins the title with the Nets. Not sure how much big of a deal that's going to be. It will be, like, because you win an NBA title, but, like, in this city, the parade, if and when the Knicks potentially win a championship again, it's going to be ridiculous, right? And Jalen Brunson being at the face of that, you're talking about, like, he's etched in stone forever. There's going to be streets named after him. There's going to be, like, all these different things if he's able to accomplish that. Julius Randle as well. Like, I don't want to sleep on him during this conversation, but, like, he's somebody who will be a big part of that as well if he's still on the roster. Presumably, they keep going in that direction. Now, I don't think that they're going to win a title this year. I still think that there needs to be some more building for that to happen. But legacy-wise, he wins a title, potentially even just brings the Knicks to the finals. He's set. Right, like, he's going to be remembered as an all-time Knick great. We'll see where he is in terms of the NBA. It's going to depend on, like, how far along he is in his career at that point, like what stage of his career we're talking about. But in the next couple of years, while he's playing like this and at his peak, man, like, he could really just etch himself in stone forever if they just simply get to the finals.
Just getting to the finals. Knicks fans would absolutely like to see that. I thought this was good. I thought we should have a good discussion around Jalen Brunson just because of the kind of season that he's having. And there's a lot that's talked about what he is and what he isn't. But see, folks, when you have a discussion with some nuance, right, Brian? Yeah. It can help. Nuance is a good thing to have sometimes around it. How do you think the Knicks will do this year in the playoffs with everything that's gone on with them? OG Anunoby back, Julius Randle gone. How far do you think this Knicks team could go?
OG helps. It depends on, like, because we don't know where the playoff matchups are going to be right now.
We still don't know that yet.
That's the hard part of it. But I thought that healthy, they could compete with anybody in the East. I don't think that means they're going to beat the Celtics, or would I even favor them to beat some of these other teams in the Eastern Conference. Like, the three-headed monster in the East to me is still Celtics, Bucks, and Heat in terms of their playoff resume, recent playoff resume. I know the Bucks don't look great right now. I know the Heat have been very up and down. And the Celtics, I'm more skeptical of, compared to other people, because the Celtics lead the league in net rating, and no team who has led the league in net rating went on to win the championship since the Kevin Durant Warriors in 2016-17, because in close games, you don't really know what that's like if you're leading the league in net rating by so much. And the Celtics, the rap on them is like, you get them in close games, which the Knicks can do, by the way. If you get them in close games, maybe you could pick them apart. So I think at minimum, what you want to see from the Knicks, if you're looking at this from just the perspective of a Knicks fan or somebody who is invested in Jalen Brunson's development, as we've been talking about, you want them to get back to the conference semifinals, and you'd be fine with that. Like, you want to see them ultimately get to the conference finals, but the Eastern Conference is hard. We'll see what happens with the Bucks, where the Heat are going to be. The Sixers also, people think they're a sleeping giant now that Joel Embiid is healthy. So I think with the Knicks, at minimum, win a playoff series. And again, kind of like last year, I would consider that a deep playoff run. Force a Game 6 in the second round. And then you do what you do in the offseason, try to come back better, stronger, and really compete again with top dogs in the East.
Yeah, I think I think it's been a successful season for Knicks. I agree with you. I think they can still win around. We'll see the matchups. We'll be doing more, breaking that all down next week. That is Bryan Fonseca. Check out his work with the New York Post, also contributing to the Action Network. This man representing for the small guards out there. Always. Bryan, I appreciate the insight, man, and joining me on New York Got Game. First time on this show. Glad to have you here.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right, we'll do it again. Thank you. So many questions to ask coming up about the Knicks as we approach the playoffs. The last day of the regular season is Sunday, April 14th. So next week, we're going to take some time to preview the postseason for the Knicks. Definitely an episode you don't want to miss. We also will have some special live broadcasts coming up during the postseason with New York Got Game. So stay tuned for that. Thanks to my guy, Bryan Fonseca, for coming through this week. Also, thank you to my production assistant, Olivia Cilio, producer Lee Insler, editors Matt Olshan and Antonio Oliveras Nicole, and my great director, Brianna Mutsindashiaka. I'm Dexter Henry. It's time to bounce. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.